everybody, my name is Elise Wong and today we're going to do a time lapse along with a quick commentary on how I painted this Christmas cake. A method I like to use for my watercolor paintings is wet on wet blending. Usually that means I would take a 100% cotton paper. I usually like this because it's more absorbent to water, the kind of blending that I like. So I prep the paper with water to make sure that the paper is wet. I would take some paint and put it on it, and then I will wash my brush and make sure the brush is wet and then blend the edges to make it softer so the blending is much more seamless. You can see that I do this again and again with different colors for the plate. After doing quite a few graphite sketches, I have come to realize that very important for one of the elements to make art beautiful is contrast, light versus dark. I try not to shy away from darkness and to be bold about it. And you can see I put darker colors all over the plate, especially the part where the cake will lie, because I want the shadow to fall into the plate, as well as trying to put darker colors around the plate to show the reflection. I'm doing the technique where I wet my brush and I would soften the edges just to give that curved look that a plate would normally give, followed by a darker outline at the edge, just to show that the edge of the plate is slightly curved. As with every skill, it just takes you to know the rules. Rinse, repeat. I fast forward this part so you can see what I'm doing is just ultimately repetition of what I just said. Moving on to the cake, the foundation is just as I said in the beginning, where I wet the paper and put a coat of light brown. I'm adding texture by taking a brush, putting some darker brown, and just giving some wiggly lines, some polka dots here and there. One thing great about art is just giving the illusion of reality. It doesn't have to be so splitting hairs of how realistic it has to be. Usually, sometimes it can just be as easy as putting polka dots or little squiggly lines just to give it that illusion of texture. Looking at the reference photo is also another important thing, depending on how realistic you want it to be. Usually I look at a lot of reference photos in order to make my art a little bit more believable, a little bit more realistic, and that really helps a lot. I do pay close attention to, for example, the lighting and the textures of how I can try to emulate. Sometimes art can be a little bit overwhelming because when we look at other people's work, or for example, a reference photo, it can look overly complicated. You're looking at it at the finished stage, the finished ideal stage where lighting, colors, contrast, everything just kind of works in harmony. And that can get very overwhelming when you look at it because you feel like everything is just so perfect. But it definitely helps when you break it into stages. If you've seen how I painted this cake, it just starts off like a very light foundation of the color. Then I slowly build up the details. It is much easier to break down into simpler steps than to look at the image as a whole and just kind of wonder, how did they even get to that? So always start simple and slowly work your way. Enjoy the process instead of always looking at the mountaintop and wondering how are you gonna get there. Is it even possible? Just walking through the woods, hiking your way up is in itself very pleasing and satisfying. The tricky thing about watercolor medium is the fact that it is transparent, meaning when we want certain areas to be white in color, for me, I feel like the best is to not color that area at all. Use the color of the paper at its purest form, as opposed to using the watercolor white, because I feel that once you add in a color by mistake and you want to remove that color, you can't just add white watercolor into it. It doesn't reverse the process. It just kind of makes it a little faded, but it doesn't actually help undo the damage. So I feel whenever that area requires white, I just try to avoid painting that area at all costs. So you can see the reflection on the candy cane. I try not to add any color whatsoever on that section. And for watercolor, I tend to try and go from light and slowly going to dark as I feel more confident, because again, it's a transparent medium. If you want it to be lighter, it's just easier to just gradually start from light and slowly getting darker and darker and darker, as opposed to starting off with dark and then you feel like, oh shit, I need it to be brighter, and then adding a white watercolor. It doesn't do it justice. Adding some shadows here, softening the edge, just doing little touch-ups here and there. And I think it's good to just add like shadows because it gives it form. It gives it a more three-dimensional look to it, as it shows the subject, how far the subject is from one another. Also adds contrast in terms of lighting. And working on the lemon now, you can see I start off light and then I slowly add the details of the veins of the little pulps of the lemon. Some places I don't paint it to kind of show a reflection. Others I paint it a little darker to show contrast and depth to the subject. Ultimately, if I feel like the food illustration requires a little bit more shine to add that yumminess to it, and I already colored most of the parts, I will take a white gel pen to add a little bit of twinkliness on it. For those who are new to the channel, I share videos and tutorials here on YouTube, and you can find free high-resolution photo references on my Patreon site. If you like what I do and you want to support me, you can show your love over at Patreon. That's all for today. If you like my videos, it would help if you hit that like and subscribe button and share it to your friends who you think might find it helpful. I share videos, tutorials, and photo references for free for artists to use. So if you'd like to support me and help make all this sustainable, you can help pledge over at Patreon. I'd like to take this time to thank my patrons for supporting me and making all of this possible. You can also join my Discord server, as I'm trying to create a community, and you can also get notified when I go live on Twitch. All links are down below in the video description, and that's all for today. I'll see you next time. Bye!